All right, let's start it up. Everybody, welcome to the EVOQ Bike Podcast. If you don't know, Scott Bowden is a new coach with us, which we are super pumped about. And in our coaches chat on WhatsApp, one of the coaches had said, "Hey guys, do you have tips for dealing with an athlete who has worked his butt off for a race and is now completely doubting if he is ready and if he should even go?" I'm going to have a great conversation with him about his doubts and why he feels that way, but I'm really curious, what would you say? And Scott laid out these bullet points that I said, immediately I was like, dude, that answer was so good. We need to make this into a podcast. Um, so before we get into this is so timely. I just had an athlete who is brand new to road racing, and he went to one crit and allowed himself to be shuffled towards the back, and a guy crashed into him. Like, I watched, he actually had it on a GoPro. Just horrible luck. Actually, the guy went around a corner, a guy hit a barrier, took a guy out, and he was right behind. Like, there's just no avoiding it. So I'm like, dude, this is dumb luck. So he's like, well, next time I want to stay up closer to the front, and I might even burn a couple matches just to like get a race under my belt where there's less chance of crashing. I'm like, dude, try and go off the front. Like, you are so new. All you're going to do is be learning and learning. You cannot fail right now. Just go race. And so he attacked a bunch early on, and about halfway through just kind of imploded and got dropped. And he's like, this is a bad idea. I shouldn't be racing. I need to get stronger first. And I completely disagree with that. I think some of these bullet points that you laid out will address that. So I was going to just read through your bullet points, and then you can extrapolate more on them if you want, or it just kind of gets the conversation going. How does that work for you?
Yeah, perfect. That sounds good. Let's get
Okay.
into it.
Okay. So you had simply said, okay, I would reassure them of things along these lines. Number one, if the work is done, the race is the time to reap the rewards. What do you think about that? And then what would you say to the athlete that's necessarily going to say, well, it's not really a reward if I don't do well?
Yeah, but I think like with racing is so much more than just the numbers that you've done in training. Like, for example, everyone knows at least one guy that has some incredible times on Strava, or I don't know, like they're the guy that half wheels you in the local bunch or something like that, a super strong guy, but then or girl. But then when it comes to the race, their performances just don't match up with how strong they are. So and that is like the proof in the pudding that the numbers and the physical strength is not everything. There's something, whether it's like tactics or race, just nous or little nuances within the race that kind of need to be learnt really just through experience. And, you know, you can have a chat to as many people as you want about racing, and that'll help, but it would only get you so far. A lot of it is just through turning up and practicing it, then talking about it, having a debrief afterwards with, you know, your buddies on a cafe ride, or, you know, your coach or someone, you know, that's more experienced. So yeah, reaping the reward. Okay, maybe there's some uncertainty as to whether you're going to turn up and actually meet your own expectations, or some sort of internal pressure you put on yourself to perform, considering, you know, you've been training and people know you've been training. So but at the end of the day, also, I think it's important to remind yourself that, like, actually no one cares. Like, the only person that cares really what you do is you. So, you know, I think it's easy. It's cycling, I'd say, is like, in terms of sports, the athletes competing, I think they just care so much, and which is a good thing. You just can't let it overrule you.
These are such good points, Scott. So I think the one thing that is a couple of things jumped out to me now with things like Strava. When you said people know you've been training, that puts so much pressure on people, because they are now internalizing, well, all these guys that I ride with know I've been working my butt off for this race. If I come in 17th, I'm going to be a loser. And but you followed it up perfectly with, when the results come out, guess whose name everybody looks for? Not yours. They look for their own. That's the only result that people care about, is where do they finish up. If I come in 23rd, guess what? Some people are like, oh man, that was not a good race for you, huh? They have forgotten that by the time they've gotten in their car and they are driving out into their own little bubble of the world and going to do all the things that matter to them. Like, your bad result, I knew I knew someone who they had a friend that would register. This is a different sport, but they would register for races in a different name so that if they had a bad result, people could not see that it was their name. And I was like, wow, that is a glimpse into like a whole different realm of being paranoid about bad days. So it's, yeah, there's just so you cannot people new athletes they don't like I'm trying to word this differently when I say like just go race, you need to just experience the race. I'm like, well, how hard should my attack be? How hard should, like, what kind of watch should I do around this corner? What should I, and I'm like, you this is not like a Zwift race where you can just be like, you need to do these watts per kg on this climb. And it's still amazing to me. I'll talk to guys that are in like the best races, like, well, to me, this watts per kilogram for this duration. I'm like, I mean, people yell at Chris Froome saying he's calculated, and look at how calculated, like it's just different games. So yeah, you got to go out and experience it. You made your second bullet point was two, regardless of the result, they can look back and be proud of the preparation along the way. Do you think that is when someone might say, well, hey, what if the preparation is one thing, but if I have a bad result, other people are going to see it. Is that just being confident in yourself and, not worrying about the other people around you? Or what do you think when you put that one out there?
100%. I think, yeah, obviously it's hard again. It's easy for someone to say, "Oh, just be more confident within yourself." Obviously that's easier, but I think it needs to start with, in cycling, if you follow it as a professional sport, I don't think you could give many examples where you see a rider after having a bad race post an elaborate post detailing all these reasons of things that went wrong and why they had a bad day, because almost like someone's asked, because they haven't asked. I mean, okay, maybe they do, but like 9 times out of someone might say to you like, oh, okay, like, gee, you didn't have a great race. Like, what's up? I can see you've done all this hard work. Or why did you perform so poorly in comparison to the amount of training you put in? But I think a lot of the time, either those people that are asking that, if they haven't worded it very in a courteous way, then, well, yeah, you kind of have to put those people to the side. And then the other people are actually probably just genuinely asking, like, what's up, and trying to see whether, you want to talk about it if you feel like you overtrained, or, I don't know, whether you got sick in the lead up or something like that. But I think with cycling, where it differs to a lot of other sports is, if you're turning up to a football match or like some sort of team sport, the whole team carries the brunt of the loss or the win. But in cycling, yes, it's a team sport, especially, but it's only really a team sport at the professional level where people are getting paid to do the job, where someone's job is like they are paid to ride the front. And if they don't finish, then that's totally fine as long as they executed the plan for the team. So in that case, no one needs to detail why they had a bad day, but it's just totally part of the sport. And I think for a local race, whatever your race is, I think, yeah, it's just a matter of putting things to the side and just accepting, I guess. The result's the result, and there's plenty more races too. Cycling, okay, I mean, everyone races a different amount, but there's so many more events, and you can have a bad day on the Saturday, do a different race on Sunday, and you could perform your best ever, as an example.
And I think the thing is, like, this guy that blew up halfway, guess what? Now he knows, don't go so hard on that type of crit, because halfway you're going to feel horrible, and you learn something. So now you don't do, like, someone who's just going to go train. So, okay, you're going to get stronger, but you're still going to make that race mistake. You need to make these mistakes. You need to fall on your face. I mean, there have been, and I think going through categories and upgrading, like, you learn that some things work as a cat 4, and then you get to a cat 3 and you're like, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't work anymore. These guys are better. And then you get to cat 1 and there's 40 of you, all very fast people. You think you're going off the front. 39 other guys are kind of giggling like, we're going to catch you, man. And you learn different things and you go to bigger races. And I just think it's part of the journey with this sport. So you kind of hit on the next bullet point. So I'm going to skip to another one where you said, and I think this is a huge one, literally just going through the process of race day and the days that lead up to it have benefits. What do you think some of those benefits are? Because I tell people, well, I'm not going to steal your thunder. You say what you think first.
Okay. Yeah. So I think, I don't know. For me now, I think I benefit, like I don't get that nervous before a race really.
Yeah. Think of like amateur Scott. Think of like not this was your this was like your profession.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, for example, if you're an amateur and you're working during the week, then it's getting used to, say, the races on Saturday, and maybe Thursday you're routinely doing like an actual training ride, but now on the Thursday you're doing a recovery ride, and then you're doing like for an hour or something, or even a rest day. And then Friday is maybe an hour and a half pre-race, for example, with some few openers. And it's just about going through that routine potential change in routine. I mean, obviously you shouldn't be doing anything completely different just before the race. So you should actually be used to that, like literally just practicing doing the same thing in the leading up to the race, because so many people, this is really big. I only was just talking with this about my teammate, about some of our French teammates, how if the race is at 2:30 p.m. on a race day, they'll only eat once before that race. So 2:30, they'll wake up in bed and they'll be sitting in bed till 10 a.m. super hungry, or till 11 a.m. just sitting in bed super hungry, and then they'll eat like just plain pasta or plain rice, and then they'll race at 2:30. And to me, that does not make sense, because when would you
a horrible strategy?
Yeah, like we are already wasting time, wasting mental energy laying in bed on a race day, just thinking about how hungry you are. And if you're used to eating at, I don't know, between say 7 and 8:30 a.m. for breakfast, why would you then change it? And also, I mean, not to mention the fact that just trying to eat once just has no logic. You could easily still eat the same amount of food, but eat twice and feel far better because of it.
100%.
But so, and then also maybe there's a particular meal, like maybe you like to keep things simple, in terms of, just eating, like whether it's a hilly race and you've been experimenting in training with like low res, not eating as much fiber potentially the week before, the couple days before the race, then doing that. And maybe you have a pre-race meal, or like at least rough guidelines for a pre-race meal. And the more you do, the more races you do, the more you go through that process of even just like packing your bag. Like I would never write a list of things I need to pack to a race anymore, because I just know what's where. And
you're bold. I still have that. There are times like in the car, I'm like, and like I look through my list, I'm like, oh damn, like I have a long list that I check over. Dude, I think even not to jump in, but I think even a step back, because a lot of people that are going to hear this are going to like their first season of races. I remember someone was like, hey, are you going to this race? I said, where is it? And they're like, look on Bike Reg. I was like, what the hell's Bike Reg? It's like the website that you go to for I didn't know what Bike Reg was. And then you figure out where it is. And then you like the whole process of getting registered, then getting to the race. And it's like, okay, where do I pick up my number? Where's the tent? Okay, you go to a little race. It's pretty clear. It's like right over there. There's only 200 people there. I went to a big race that had 3,000 racers. It was the biggest one-day race in North America. I rolled in and it was like, you parked here, you rode down there, the porta potties were way over there. And it was like, whoa, good thing we're here early, because, and there you could see people scrambling, and they got there, like half an hour before, and there was like, you were going to be late. And so I think just going through and all the little things of like, did you bring your bottles filled? I never drive to ride. So for me, I'm filling my bottles in my kitchen. If I show up and there's empty bottles, there's always somebody at the race who's like, oh, damn, I forgot water. because you're not thinking what, bring water, bring food for after, bring, so like, and then especially if you go do an Omnium, which is in the Southeast here in the US, is a little bit more popular, or I should say more frequent than it was up in the Northeast where I started racing. You've got more back-to-back days. They do a lot of time trials after road races. So it's like, are you used to finishing your road race, then staying like pretty liquid, like bike race food-ish for maybe a couple hours till you do a time trial? Like you don't want to go eat a big sub, even though you're really hungry, or I don't know if sub is a word, and like a big sandwich. What do they call that?
No,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the process of racing, you learn so much. And then it gets to what you were kind of talking about before, of it became your job. So it's just second nature. And so I think the more you do it though, the better prepared you are to have that transition of like, you don't get nervous. You just feel it's just a similar situation that's just part of your life.
Definitely. And I think, yeah, even little things like you say, like knowing roughly how long you need to get to the event before, knowing like what your strategy is the morning of the race in terms of nutrition, and like that will depend on what time the races start. I don't know, even being prepared, having things like a Tupperware container if you're going to eat on the drive on the way there, or having just knowing how to pin your numbers on, or put a transponder on, or knowing whether, like, say, if it's a technical criterium, knowing that if you need to be, like, you should be lining up, you should be that guy that lines up early to be on the front, because unless you're super confident in the bunch, then you have to spend the first, 10, 15 minutes when the race, people do go hard at the start of criteriums, particularly when they're technical, because it's an advantage to be at the front. So just like knowing little things like that. And actually, like you said, with the how hard do I attack question, well, once you become comfortable of the more you race, the more you know how to measure your own effort within a race. And also you can learn just through observing. Like you learn, like also you can learn in France, for example, how not to attack, because the French are really big for, they'll attack, say, for like 10 to 30 seconds, 10 to 40 seconds, and whether it's on a climb or whatever, and they'll ride at their absolute maximum, which, credit to them, like that can be quite hard to do. Like an amateur, when they're starting racing, they don't have that thing in their brain where they can actually just ride as hard as they possibly can within the race, because they still have this thing in their head of, I still need to get to the finish. These guys don't have that at all, and they'll just go as hard as they can. But then I would never jump immediately with them. If they did that, for example, on a climb, I would just lock in at, like, say, 500 watts, because that, for me, that's what I know I can sort of sit at for a safe amount of time and close the gap. Maybe it takes me a few seconds longer, but once I get there, I can then roll through and start pulling to go on with the move. And then what happens is that if you follow the wrong person, well, that's not that strong, then they do this big acceleration. And then if the road doesn't get blocked by teams going to the front, then, and they don't just let you go, then you're coming straight back. Mm-hmm. So that's what not to do. But then by watching someone, or even just following people that know how to attack, and following people in the bunch that know how to race, like if you're racing the same guys often, you can get a good idea of not just who's the strongest, but who knows how to race and who knows their way around a bunch. And you can observe those people in the race. And actually, if you're following them, okay, you still do your own race. You don't have to follow someone for a whole race, but just here and there, you can actually pick up a lot just from that. And even how they manage their effort, when they attack, how they attack. Do they attack into a corner because they're good at cornering? Do they attack out of it? Do they attack they counter attack after it's just been really hard? Or, when there's a lull in the bunch, they come from behind and do it, and to carry the speed and momentum. So it's not all about actually how much power they're doing. It's just the moment that they've chosen in the race to try and attack. It's all little things like that when you're in the race and you do it, it's a far easier way to learn. And the thing with that is then you just can't be you can't have a fear of failure in the race. Like, I mean, that's the beauty of cycling. Like, you can try different things. You'll soon find out whether it does or doesn't work. Yeah.
That is right there. I mean, put yourself in race scenarios. I look back and I'm so thankful. I mean, I think we all coach athletes where it's like they might have 5 races on the calendar. And I tell people straight up, I say, hey, listen, if you're going to race 5 times, it's going to be really difficult to do well unless you are the strongest person, because you're just not getting enough experience. And we had our club in Rochester, New York is actually about 250 members back in the day. And within the club, there's all these different teams, but they're all one club, and there's training races every Tuesday night. And they would group 4s and 5s and then 1, 2s and 3s. So you'd have really experienced people that everyone's obviously trying to win, but they would give you pointers and really try and just make the races, make everyone as good as possible. So the races were as hard as possible. So everyone got really good training from it. It was invaluable. I mean, because then automatically, if you just stay local, you could race 30 times that summer, which is like, to an amateur, is like, holy cow, 30 races. I mean, if you had to drive to 30 races, like that's a lot in the US, that's a lot. So I think just getting experience. And so someone says, well, hey, I don't have that. What do I do? I said, well, what's your group ride like? And don't just have a group ride where it's like a 30-second sprint. Have some tactics where you're learning, like, who's trying to get away, who, like, some people down here call them like hot spots, where it's like, okay, over the next 10 miles, we're live. And, the guys who can't sprint are trying to get away. The guys who are trying to sprint, trying to have their teammates bring back to it. And it's like a little race for 10 miles. And then it resets and they do it again. They'll rest for 5 miles and then do it again. I'm like, that's all these little race scenarios. You got to do that and just try things. Dude, no one cares if you attack and go off the front and get caught. No one's laughing at you. Like, less ego and you will get so much better at bike racing. Like, don't worry about what other people think. You got to go fall on your face and try things.
Yeah, 100%. Actually, people as well, I think where I've learned, times where I've learned the most in bike racing is actually when I've turned up to races nowhere near my best. And I think that's what an example of that is, like, also everyone knows from their local bunch or the local races, that older guy that he's nowhere near as fit as what he used to be like 10, 20, 30 years ago, but he's still like really quite strong and he's always there or thereabouts at the end. And it's definitely not because, he's the strongest. It's because he knows how to get through a bike race. And like, I've learned through like, going to races when I'm not at my best, like just domestically in Australia, that you can actually still be quite good even when you're not at your best. Obviously it depends on the race. Like, you can't just bluff your way through a really hard race, but you very well might surprise yourself. And it does teach you to be more efficient, because if you want to get to the finish in the front, you have to be efficient and not waste energy. And it's like, in fact, sometimes people even get better results when they're not quite at their best, because they do race smarter and they do use their head, as opposed to like when people are strong, they go there so confident that they're just one of the strongest there, and they probably are, but they just over race it like crazy, and everyone else sees that they're strong. So every time a gap or something needs closing, or everyone looks to that guy that's really strong, and then before they get to the end, pretty well they've brought themselves down a few pegs to the next best guy's level, because they've just spent so many matches.
I was hoping that was we had 2 more bullet points, and that was your last one. I was hoping you were going to bring up that word of efficiency. And I think another way to look at this too and apply that mentality is when you go and warm up and you're thinking, oh man, I don't feel so good today. I'm not feeling my numbers, the RP is higher, and that can instantly psych people out. And I say, hey, that race is going to happen. You're going to warm up, and who knows, the legs might turn on and you're going to be fine. But then don't freak out. Just say, okay, hey, maybe I have a few less matches today. Even if your legs don't feel good, you're still going to be within, whatever percentage of where you're at. Unless you're like overtrained or you're just having a really bad day or something, like it's not going to be that bad once you get going. But just tell yourself, okay, hey, maybe I have a few less full blast attacks. Maybe I really have to think about when I'm going to use these matches. And I think that's even something that needs to be considered when you're in a road race. There have been plenty of times when it's towards the end and you're thinking, okay, I've got one more big attack. Like, I need to use this. Why? When can I use that? If I use that now, who's looking good? If I use it then, like, and you just got to play these situations through in your mind. And at the end of the day, it's you make a roll of the dice, or maybe you play what cards you have. And when you play them, I mean, that's, you're not always going to know how everyone else is going to respond to it. And you just have to make your best, most educated guess. And your best guess is going to come from leaning on all the experience that you have from the other races that you've done. And so if you've never raced and you never put yourself in these situations, you have no idea what's going to happen. So just goes back to need to do these races if you want to do well. What do you think? Your last comment was, it's not uncommon for the best performances to come on days when you least expect it. What do you have a personal example of that?
I mean, I can think of a lot of races like where I guess for me it was quite a good performance personally, and I don't know, like a stage of Tour of Taiwan. I had my Di2 cable kept coming out on the rear, so I only had the front two shifters, and like it happened on the Queen stage, which finished with like sort of a 10K climb, and then it was like undulating and really technical windy roads along the side of this lake, and then a slight uphill drag. Actually, James Piccoli won it solo, but it was a photo finish because we caught him, the sort of front selection caught him on the line.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, he held on. But that day, yeah, my front cable kept coming out, and then I stopped and the mechanic put it back in when the breakaway was still trying to go. So it was super fast and hard, and not a good time to be back in the convoy on sort of not the best roads. And then I got back to the peloton, then hit another bump, and it happened again just as we hit the base of the first KOM of the day. And then I had to do this climb. I think I was maybe like a fair way down the cassette. So I then had, and I think at least now I always run a 54-39, but whatever, I had my two front chain rings anyway. And I was either slightly like over geared where I had to stand up out of the saddle and just munch a massive gear, or I was like under geared and having to like sit down and spin like an uncomfortable amount. But thankfully, I think the pace was relatively smooth. Maybe the brake had just gone, but then over the top, it went super hard again. And it was onto more of like a technical, slight downhill road, some like switchback corners. And I decided at the top of this climb in the village to just stop then and commit to hopping on the spare bike for the rest of the day. And the spare bike had like, I don't know, C60 wheels, and I'd chosen C40s because I'd chosen the climbing wheels versus like the deeper, bit heavier wheels. And my spare bike had Ultegra Di2, not Durace Di2, so like a bit heavier. Didn't have a bike mount on it, so when I took a bike computer mount. So when I took off my bike computer, I had it just in my pocket with no power. And like if I wanted to see how many kilometers to go, I'd just pull out my computer from my pocket and look at it on the screen. Or if I wanted to get an idea of, when I needed to be eating next or something, I would do that. But then that just occupied my mind for the whole race, that then I thought like, I'm not on the right bike. It's heavier. It's got the deeper wheels. I've had to stop and chase back a couple of times. And it was sort of not the best time to be chasing back, so I'm wasting energy. But then I just decided, well, okay, that's fine. Now I've got the deeper wheels. I'm going to use less energy on the flat, and I'm going to have fresher legs at the end. And it's just, this has occupied the start of my race. Like I could have been at the front potentially following into moves. So maybe I've actually spent the same amount of energy. And then I finished fourth in the sprint. And that's not the best example because, okay, maybe I'd say my form was just fine before it. It wasn't so much an issue of that, but I'd say it is an example of like, then once that happened, I didn't then really expect that would be a day that I got told I was third. So I was like, oh, great. Like I just got on the podium of the stage in a photo finish for the win. And then it ended up being I was fourth. And then another example, like at the national championships when I was third, I felt terrible. The first couple of laps, like we started hard straight out of the blocks into like a 6.5 minute climb from the start line, and it was hard. And the race didn't really let up. And I felt terrible for the first hour. But yeah, again, I was like, it's fine. Like the first hour, as long as I can be where I need to be, then it doesn't really matter how I feel. Like it's just the last, say, 50K where the race is really won or lost. And feeling bad now just means I'm going to conserve my energy more. And it's often the case, even a local criterium that's, 40 minutes to an hour, it's rarely won in the first half. So like, if you're not feeling good, just say to yourself, okay, I'm going to do nothing until 20 minutes to go. And maybe a breakaway goes and I miss it. And that's unfortunate. But like, then you can tell yourself, well, I wasn't feeling great anyway. But when you have some sort of strategy like that on a day where you don't feel like you're super prepared or whatever, you then give yourself the best opportunity, because then hopefully you don't over race. And then if you do get to the end, you haven't done as much as the other guys. And maybe then you can actually use those few bullets less that you have at a time in the race when it actually matters. And maybe you come off with a better result.
Plus, when you're there, you can't do anything to change it. You just got to go race, and you got to just, as you say, turn up. And I think that even if you have these bad feelings, thinking and ruminating on it of how, I feel so bad, that's not gonna make you feel good. So it's like, just keep going. There's nothing else that you can do, and you hope that you feel better the next day. But I think there's so many times where it's just so many things happen in a bike race. Stephen Bassett, on the first podcast we did, he said people talk about these magical days where all the planets lined up perfectly and everything went amazingly well, and just the victory just happened. He said that's not how it happens. He goes, maybe only 25% of my day went bad, and the other guy's day went 35% bad, and that's how I won. Like, there's so many things that happen over the time of a bike race that just trying to over predict it, over calculate it, over worry about how you feel, just go turn up and do it and make the best choices that you can in the moment. And that kind of correlates to, it's so common for newer racers to try to dictate, okay, hey, Joey, it's your turn to get in the break this week, or you're going to go this, and this is on the fourth lap, we're doing this. And I'm like, guys, it's great to think about the race, and it's great to discuss how you're feeling and have you been training and get a general gist, but the gun goes off and all the plans go out the window, and you got to just race. And well, what does that mean? Go race, and you'll know what I mean. I mean, it's you figure out the flow of the race, the dynamic, what's the group doing. Some races, the group's not letting anything go for whatever reason. Other days, things go on the first lap. Like, you got to know what's happening and adjust. So, anyways, this was awesome, man. Any closing thoughts so to answer the questions, should I race? I think the number one is yes, because you need the experience. Number two, you're gonna be able, all these little like feelings and where's this and what's this, the process of racing, you iron that out more. I think those are the two biggest things for me. It just becomes a more natural process for the athlete. Anything else that comes to mind of, like, if someone's like, hey, should I race? Do we miss any big points? I think kind of hit them.
I think that's pretty much it. I mean, obviously there are some, if it was a different, this is for one scenario where the person's sort of doubting themselves potentially. I think it's probably important to note that there are some circumstances where if someone obviously was asking their coach, should I race? And it's because of X, Y, and Z, like, for example, they've been sick all week.
Good point. Yeah.
Or maybe they have, like, not just sickness or physical, but like a lot of general life stress, whatever it may be, then maybe they are better to take the weekend off. But if it's like racing, also then depending on what that stress is, depending on the situation, maybe they are better off going and just, again, trying to remember that, like, bike racing's supposed to be fun. And that even if your result isn't the best, that you're going and hopefully chatting with your mates and actually getting some endorphins and just having a good time out there, and enjoying the pain basically.
Dude, that's a really good clarification. I'm definitely putting that in the notes, because last season even I had someone who won their state championship. So now it's like they're the state champ. They felt this pressure to, I've got to be at every race. And they sounded exhausted at one point. I said, "Do you want to go to this race this weekend?" And she said, "Not really." I said, "Then why are you going?" She's like, I don't know. It's within 4 hours. I feel like I should drive and go do that. I said, "You've been racing your face off. You just won the state championship. Like, you don't have to prove anything. Like, you don't have to be at every race, and you can't be at every race. Like, maybe every local race, but there was a lot of races down there that year." And she was like, "Do you think I can just skip it?" I said, "Yes, you can skip it. Would you rather go ride like endurance?" She said, "I would love to do that." I said, "Great. We're not doing the race." And it was like the biggest weight had been lifted off her shoulders. And I think you make a really good point. This is definitely for the people who are wondering, are they ready? Maybe I should. You're kind of on the fence. But yeah, if you're really good clarification, Scott. Cool, man. Well, thanks for doing this. We'll have to do another one. And I'm going to cut it right here.